I'd packed my suitcase, bought new clothes, had my hair done, ready to enjoy the vacation with my daughter and grandchildren. But just as I stepped out the door, a cold text from my only daughter knocked the breath out of me. "Mom, you won't be joining us on the Cabo trip. My husband wants only his family." His family? What was I then? An outsider. Right then, I knew. Blood doesn't always mean family. And right then, I decided I wouldn't let myself be used for one more second. My name is Helen Gardner, and at 70 years old, I thought I knew what betrayal felt like. My husband passed away 8 years ago, leaving me alone in our modest home near Denver. But nothing could have prepared me for the invisible slap my own daughter delivered that Tuesday morning. I stood there in my hallway, one hand on my rolling suitcase, the other clutching my phone like it had suddenly turned into a venomous snake. The words on the screen blurred, then sharpened again as I reread Rachel's message. "Mom, you won't be joining us on the Cabo trip. My husband wants only his family." Only his family. The phrase echoed in my skull, each repetition driving the knife deeper. I'd raised Rachel alone after her father died. I'd worked double shifts at the hospital, sacrificed vacations, retirement savings, everything to give her the best life possible. I'd welcomed Ethan into our family with open arms when they married 12 years ago. I'd been there for every holiday, every birthday, every milestone of my grandchildren's lives, and now I was relegated to the category of not family. The irony wasn't lost on me. Just 6 months ago, Rachel had sobbed in this very hallway, mascara running down her cheeks as she begged for help with their dream house. The memory was so vivid I could still smell her perfume, that expensive French brand she always wore despite claiming they were struggling financially. "Mom, please," she'd said, gripping my hands. "It's the perfect house for the kids. The school district is amazing, but we're just $90,000 short for the down payment. I swear we'll pay you back. You know Ethan's promotion is coming through any day now." $90,000, nearly my entire life savings, accumulated through decades of careful budgeting and modest living. But what mother could resist those tears? What grandmother could deny her grandchildren a better future? I'd written that check with a shaking hand but a full heart. Even agreed to help with their monthly mortgage payments. Another $2,000 bleeding from my account every month because things were tight while they settled in. Things were tight. Yet somehow, there was money for Rachel's weekly spa appointments, money for Ethan's golf club membership, money for the matching Mercedes SUVs in their driveway, money for designer clothes and 5-star restaurants plastered all over their Instagram feeds, and definitely money for a family vacation to Cabo, just not family that included me. I set my suitcase upright and walked to my kitchen on unsteady legs. The morning light streaming through the window illuminated the dust motes floating in the air, making everything look hazy and unreal. On the refrigerator, held by a magnet shaped like a sunflower, was the photo from last Christmas. All of us together, smiling, Rachel's arm around my shoulder, Ethan's practiced politician's grin, my grandchildren, Emma and Josh, making silly faces at the camera. How long had they been planning this? How many family dinners had I attended where they'd discussed their Cabo trip, knowing they would exclude me? How many times had Rachel looked me in the eye and lied? I pulled the photo off the refrigerator and studied my daughter's face. When had she become this person? The little girl who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms, who'd written me Mother's Day cards, calling me her best friend in the whole world. Where had she gone? My phone buzzed. Another text from Rachel. "I knew you'd understand. Mom, you always do. We'll bring you back a souvenir." A souvenir. As if a cheap trinket could compensate for being deemed unworthy of a family vacation, I was partially funding through my monthly donations to their household. That's when the fog of hurt began to lift, replaced by something harder, colder. For years, I'd been willfully blind, mistaking their tolerance for love, their greed for need, but that message had ripped away the veil. I saw it all clearly now. I wasn't a mother or grandmother to them. I was an ATM with a convenient babysitting feature. Well, Even ATMs have daily limits, and mine had just been reached. The exploitation hadn't started with the house. Looking back now, I could trace the pattern like following breadcrumbs through a dark forest. It began small, $100 here for Emma's dance classes, $200 there for Josh's soccer camp, just until Ethan's commission check comes in, Rachel would say. Her voice honey-sweet over the phone. The commission checks came. I'm sure of that. I saw the evidence on their social media. The weekend trips to Aspen, the $1,000 dinners at downtown steakhouses, Rachel's growing collection of Louis Vuitton bags, but somehow they never had money to pay me back. Then came the bigger asks. $3,000 for a car repair emergency that coincidentally happened right before they posted photos from a wine tasting tour in Napa. $5,000 for unexpected medical bills the same month Ethan showed off his new Rolex. Each time, I told myself it was for my grandchildren. Each time. I pushed down the growing knot of resentment in my stomach. The house was just the culmination of years of financial manipulation. That day, 6 months ago, when Rachel came crying to me, I should have seen it for what it was, a performance worthy of an Oscar. She'd even brought the kids along, though they stayed in the car. I didn't want them to see me like this, she'd said, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. Now I wondered if she'd kept them outside because children are terrible liars, and they might have given away the game. The seller won't wait, she'd pleaded. There are 3 other offers. We'll lose it if we can't put down the full amount by Friday. Mom, you know I wouldn't ask if we had any other option. This house. It's walking distance to the best elementary school. Emma and Josh deserve this chance. My grandchildren. She always knew exactly which buttons to push. I'd driven to the bank that very afternoon, ignoring the worried look from the teller who'd handled my accounts for 15 years. That's quite a withdrawal. Mrs. Gardner, are you sure everything's all right? Everything was all right, I'd told her. I was helping my family. The $90,000 was supposed to be a loan. Rachel had even sent me a text message. I'd saved it, thank God, promising to pay it back within 2 years. With interest, she'd added, as if that made it more legitimate. But then came the mortgage payments. They'd bought more house than they could afford, banking on my continued support. Just for a few months, Rachel had assured me when she called 2 weeks after closing. Ethan's waiting on a huge deal to close. Once that comes through, we'll be set. You understand, don't you, Mom? You always taught me family helps family. Family helps family. I'd said those words so many times when she was young, usually when I was exhausted from a 12-hour shift but still helping her with homework or driving her to activities. I never imagined she'd weaponize my own values against me. The monthly $2,000 payments began, automatic transfers that drained my checking account like clockwork. Meanwhile, their lifestyle inflation continued unabated, new furniture that cost more than my car, a kitchen renovation because Rachel decided she didn't like the energy of the existing one, a pool installation, for the kids. Naturally, I started making excuses not to visit. It hurt too much to see where my money was going while I was clipping coupons and buying generic brands to stretch my reduced budget. When I did go over for Sunday dinners, I'd watch Ethan pour wine that cost more than my weekly grocery budget while complaining about how tough the market was. "You're so lucky you're retired, Helen," he'd say. Never Mom, always Helen. No stress, no pressure. Must be nice. No stress. I'd lie awake at 3 a.m., calculating how long my remaining savings would last if I needed medical care. I'd started skipping my own doctor's appointments, telling myself I felt fine. The stress was eating me alive, but I smiled and nodded because that's what mothers do. The worst part was how entitled they'd become. The thank yous had stopped months ago. Now, if the payment was even a day late, Rachel would call, her voice tight with barely concealed irritation. "Mom, the mortgage company charges a late fee if we're even 1 day overdue. I thought you understood how important this is." I understood perfectly. I was no longer her mother who'd sacrificed everything. I was an obligation, a resource to be mined until depleted, and like any mine, once I was empty, I'd be abandoned. But they'd made one crucial mistake. They'd assumed my love was infinite, that my blindness was permanent. That text message about Cabo had been like ice water in my face. Suddenly, I could see every manipulation, every lie, every time they'd chosen greed over gratitude. The invisible slap had woken me up. And now, it was time to slap back. My hands were surprisingly steady as I dialed the bank's number. 20 minutes on hold gave me time to rehearse what I would say, to push down the last wisps of maternal guilt trying to crawl up my throat. "Good morning, Mrs. Gardner," the representative said when she finally picked up. "How can I help you today?" "I need to cancel an automatic payment," I said, my voice crisp and businesslike. "The monthly transfer to Rachel Morrison's account, effective immediately." "Of course. May I ask the reason for the cancellation?" "For our records." I almost laughed. The reason? How about betrayal, manipulation, and the sudden realization that I'd been funding a lifestyle for people who didn't even consider me family? But I simply said, "The loan arrangement has ended. I see the cancellation will take effect immediately. The next scheduled payment for tomorrow will not process. Is there anything else?" Tomorrow. They were leaving for Cabo in 3 days. The timing couldn't have been more perfect. "Actually, yes," I said, surprising myself with the calm in my voice. "I'd like to review all transactions to that account over the past 6 months. Can you email me the statements?" As I waited for the documents to arrive, I made another call, this one to my mortgage company. If I was going to war, I needed to know exactly what ammunition I had. "I'm calling about the Morrison property on Maple Creek Drive," I said after verifying my identity. "I've been making payments on their behalf." "Yes, Mrs. Gardner. I show you as an authorized payer on the account. How can I help you? What's the current balance and the monthly payment amount?" The numbers she rattled off made my blood run cold. The monthly payment was $3,000, not the $2,000 Rachel had told me. For 6 months. They'd been lying about even that, pocketing an extra $1,000 each month on top of everything else. "Also," the representative continued, "I should mention there's a second mortgage on the property. Are you making payments on that as well?" A second mortgage. My stomach dropped. No, I wasn't aware of that. When was it taken out? Let me see. It was initiated 2 months after the primary mortgage, for $75,000. $75,000. They'd taken out another loan almost immediately after I'd given them $90,000 for the down payment. Where had that money gone? The kitchen renovation, the pool, those matching Mercedes? I thanked the representative and hung up. My earlier calm replaced by a cold fury that settled in my bones like winter frost. They hadn't just lied about needing money. They'd lied about the amount, taken out additional loans, and been stealing an extra $1,000 a month while crying poverty. The email from my bank arrived, and I spent the next hour creating a spreadsheet. $90,000 for the down payment. $18,000 in mortgage payments over 6 months. No, make that $12,000. Since they'd been skimming, another $15,000 in emergency loans over the past 2 years, various smaller amounts that added up to another $8,000, $125,000. That's what my love had cost me. I stared at the number until it burned into my retinas. That money was supposed to be my safety net, my hedge against medical emergencies, my legacy to leave behind. Instead, it had funded their greed while I economized on everything from groceries to medication. My phone rang. Rachel's name flashed on the screen. For a moment, I considered letting it go to voicemail, but then I realized I wanted to hear what she'd say. I wanted to catalog the lies as they spilled from her lips. "Hi, Mom." Her voice was bright, carefree. "I just wanted to check that you got my text about Cabo. I know it was last minute, but Ethan's parents really wanted this to be a special trip for their side of the family. You understand, right?" "Of course," I said, marveling at how easy it was to keep my voice neutral. "Family is important. I knew you'd get it. You're the best. Oh, and Mom? The mortgage payment should go through tomorrow. You did set that up, right? It would be such a hassle to deal with while we're away." "About that," I said, settling into my kitchen chair. "I've been looking at my finances, and I'm afraid I can't continue the payments." The silence on the other end was deafening. When she finally spoke, Her voice had lost its sweetness. "What do you mean you can't continue? Mom, we have an agreement." "Yes, we do. You were supposed to pay me back, with interest, I believe you said." "That's—" "Mom, you know things have been tight. Once Ethan's promotion—" "Rachel," I interrupted, "what's the actual amount of your mortgage payment?" "What? It's $2,000, like I told you." "Try again." Another silence. Then, defensive. "Okay, it's a bit more, but we didn't want to burden you with $3,000. It's $3,000. You've been stealing an extra $1,000 from me every month while lying to my face." "Stealing, Mom? That's a horrible thing to say. We were going to tell you—" "When? After you got back from the vacation, I'm not family enough to attend?" I heard her sharp intake of breath. For the first time in years, I'd rendered my daughter speechless. "The payments stop now," I continued, "and I'll be expecting full repayment of the loan, with interest, as you promised." "Mom, you can't do this. We'll lose the house." "Then I suggest you figure something out. Maybe sell one of the Mercedes, or cancel Cabo. I'm sure Ethan's family will understand." I hung up before she could respond, then turned off my phone. My hands were shaking now, but not from fear or sadness. It was pure adrenaline, the kind you feel when you finally stop running and decide to turn and fight. This was just the first crack in their foundation. By the time I was done, the whole house of cards would come tumbling down. The next morning, I knocked on my neighbor's door at precisely 9 a.m. Mark Ellis answered, looking surprised to see me, and he was in his early 30s, a corporate lawyer who'd moved in 2 years ago and had always been polite but distant. "Mrs. Gardner? Is everything all right?" "I need legal advice," I said. "I'm willing to pay your hourly rate." Something in my expression must have conveyed the seriousness of the situation, because he stepped aside immediately. "Come in. Let's talk in my home office." Over the next hour, I laid out everything: the loans, the lies, the text messages, the bank statements. Mark listened without interrupting, occasionally jotting notes on a legal pad. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair, tapping his pen against the desk. "First, the good news," he said. "You have a strong case. The text message promising repayment creates a written agreement. The bank statements show clear evidence of the transfers. The fact that they've been misrepresenting the mortgage amount could even be construed as fraud. And the bad news? Family lawsuits are messy, emotionally and financially. Are you prepared for that?" I thought about the Cabo text, about years of being treated like a walking ATM. I've already lost my daughter. I might as well try to recover my money. Mark nodded slowly. "All right, let's go through your documents systematically. We'll need everything: emails, texts, bank records, any written communication about the money." We spent the next 3 hours building my case. Mark was thorough, methodical, and surprisingly kind. When I mentioned I'd been skipping doctor's appointments to save money, his jaw tightened. "They knew you were on a fixed income?" "Of course. Rachel always said I was lucky to have my pension and Social Security, said it must be nice to have guaranteed money." He made another note, underlining it twice. "That could speak to their knowledge of your financial vulnerability." As we organized documents, more evidence emerged. Screenshots I'd forgotten about showing Rachel's Instagram posts from expensive restaurants dated the same days she'd claimed they couldn't afford groceries. An email where Ethan had accidentally forwarded me a message meant for Rachel, discussing how to work me for more money. "This is damning," Mark said. Reading the email, he literally uses the phrase, "Your mom is our cash cow." Cash cow? Is that what I'd become? Just livestock to be milked dry? "There's more," I said, pulling out my phone. "I started documenting things a few months ago. I don't know why. Maybe some part of me knew this day would come." I showed him photos I'd taken during my last visit to their house. The new 65-inch TV for the kids' educational shows. The renovation receipts I'd found on their counter totaling $40,000. The vacation brochures for Hawaii, Costa Rica, and now Cabo, all dated after they'd started taking my money. "This is excellent documentation," Mark said. "You've essentially built your own case. Now, let's talk strategy." He explained my options: a demand letter first, formally requesting repayment. If they refused, We'd file a civil suit. The evidence was strong enough that they'd likely try to settle out of court to avoid the embarrassment. "There's something else," he said, pulling up something on his computer. "Public records show they've been missing credit card payments. They're carrying significant debt beyond the mortgages. Your money wasn't solving their problems. It was enabling their spending addiction." I stared at the screen showing their financial records. Multiple credit cards maxed out. Store credit accounts in collections. They were drowning in debt while posting photos of their perfect life online. How much do they owe altogether? Mark did some quick calculations. Between the mortgages, credit cards, and other debts, close to $700,000. Their house is worth maybe $500,000 in this market. They were underwater. Even with my money propping them up, they'd been spiraling toward bankruptcy, and instead of cutting back, they doubled down on the lifestyle, using me as their personal bailout fund. "Helen," Mark said gently, "even if you win a judgment, they might not have money to pay you back." "Then I'll take the house," I said, the words coming out harder than I intended. "It's partially mine anyway, isn't it? My money made it possible." He studied me for a moment. "You've thought about this. I've been thinking about it since yesterday. If they lose the house because they can't pay the mortgage without me, it'll go to foreclosure. The bank will auction it. I could buy it. That's actually not a bad strategy. Foreclosure auctions often go below market value. With your lawsuit pending, other buyers might be scared off." It was like playing chess. I realized I'd been a pawn for years, pushed around the board at their whim. But pawns that reach the other side become queens, and queens control the board. "Draw up the demand letter," I said. "Give them 30 days to respond. Make sure it arrives while they're in Cabo." Mark raised an eyebrow. "That's cold." "No," I corrected him. "That's justice. Let them enjoy their vacation knowing it's the last one they'll take on my dime." As I left Mark's house, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years: power. Not the destructive kind that my daughter and son-in-law had wielded over me, but the clean, sharp power of someone who'd finally decided to stand up. My phone had been off since yesterday. When I turned it on, it exploded with messages. 43 missed calls from Rachel, 18 from Ethan, text after text, escalating from confusion to anger to panic. "Mom, please call me back. This isn't funny anymore. You can't just cut us off without warning. The mortgage company called. What have you done? Mom, please, we need to talk about this rationally." "Fine, be that way. You'll regret this when you don't see your grandchildren anymore." I deleted them all without responding. The time for talking was over. Now, it was time for consequences. That night, I sat in my garden, the same garden I'd neglected while running myself ragged trying to please my daughter. Tomorrow, I'd start tending it again. Tomorrow, I'd reclaim all the pieces of myself I'd given away. The game had begun, and for the first time in years, I was the one making the moves. 3 days into their Cabo vacation, Rachel called from a Mexican number. I'd been expecting this. She'd figure out I'd blocked her regular phone. I let it ring 3 times before answering, making sure my voice was perfectly pleasant. "Hello? Mom, thank God. I've been trying to reach you. Your phone must be broken or something." Her voice was breathless, the fake concern almost convincing. "My phone's working fine. Dear, how's Cabo?" A pause. Mom, why haven't you been answering? We've been worried sick." Worried sick. They were sipping margaritas on a beach while I'd been meeting with lawyers. "Oh, I've been busy. You know how it is. Lots to do when you're not part of the family vacation." "Mom, about that. How's your health, by the way?" I interrupted. "You must have been terribly ill to miss our plans." "What?" "Well, that's what you told Emma and Josh, isn't it? That Grandma was too sick to come?" The silence stretched so long I wondered if we'd been disconnected. When she finally spoke, her voice had lost its sweetness entirely. "How did you know that?" Emma texted me from Ethan's parents' phone. Such a thoughtful granddaughter, worried about her sick grandma. Imagine her confusion when I told her I was perfectly healthy. "Mom, I can explain." "Can you? Can you explain why you told your children I was ill instead of admitting you'd uninvited me? Can you explain why lying comes so easily to you?" It was Ethan's idea. The words burst out of her like water from a broken dam. His parents they're difficult. They wouldn't understand why we need your help with the house. They think we should be financially independent. Financially independent. What a novel concept. Mom, please, I know you're angry, but cutting off the mortgage payments, that's extreme. We could lose everything. I settled into my garden chair, admiring the roses that had finally started blooming. Rachel, do you remember when you were 16 and you stole money from my wallet? What? Mom, that was decades ago. You needed it for a concert ticket. All your friends were going. You took $40 and denied it until I found the ticket stub in your jeans. Do you remember what I said then? Her voice was small. That trust is like glass. Once broken, it can never be perfectly repaired. Yet I forgave you. I trusted you again, and again, and again. Each time you broke that trust, I picked up the pieces and handed them back to you. But I'm 70 years old. Rachel, I don't have time to keep handling broken glass. So you're punishing me? Punishing your grandchildren? I'm not punishing anyone. I'm simply redirecting my resources. You made it clear I'm not family. Non-family members don't typically pay family bills. Mom, I didn't mean it like that. How did you mean it exactly? Help me understand how I misinterpreted being excluded from a family vacation. She tried another angle. Josh has been asking about you. He doesn't understand why Grandma Helen isn't here. My heart clenched, but I'd prepared for this manipulation. Then perhaps you should explain to him that sometimes adults make choices that hurt others. It's a valuable life lesson. I can't believe you're being so cruel. Cruel? I laughed, surprising myself with how genuine it sounded. Rachel, I gave you $125,000. I've been paying your mortgage, funding your lifestyle, enabling your lies. And when I stop, I'm cruel? What does that make you? $125,000? Mom, that's not... I have spreadsheets. Would you like me to email them to you? Though I suppose it's hard to check email from the beach. Her tone shifted to desperation. Okay, you're right. We've taken advantage. I'm sorry. When we get back, we'll sit down and work out a repayment plan. You'll be receiving a formal demand letter at your home. My lawyer says you'll have 30 days to respond. Your lawyer? Mom, you hired a lawyer? Against your own daughter? No. Rachel, I hired a lawyer against two people who've been defrauding me. The fact that one of them happens to be my daughter is incidental. Defrauding? How dare you? The mortgage payment discrepancy alone could be considered fraud. The second mortgage you never mentioned? The credit card debts you've been hiding while claiming poverty? My lawyer finds it all very interesting. You had no right to look into our finances. Actually, I had every right to investigate where my money was going. Due diligence, my lawyer calls it. I heard muffled voices in the background, Ethan asking what was wrong. Rachel's sharp response to give her a minute. Mom, she said, her voice now carefully controlled, let's not let this get out of hand. We're family. We can work this out without lawyers. Are we family? Because 3 days ago, I distinctly remember being told otherwise. I explained that. It was Ethan's parents, who are apparently more important than the woman funding your life. I understand perfectly. What do you want? She asked, frustration bleeding through. An apology. You want me to grovel? I want my money back. All of it, with interest, as promised. You know we can't pay that all at once. Then I suggest you start liquidating assets. The Mercedes, the boat Ethan bought last summer. Maybe skip the kitchen renovation you have planned for next month. How did you... The contractor called me. Apparently, you listed me as a reference for financing. I told him the Bank of Helen is permanently closed. She made a sound somewhere between a sob and a growl. You're destroying our lives over one mistake. One mistake, Rachel. You've been lying to me for years. Every emergency, every sob story, every manipulation, those weren't mistakes. They were choices. And now, I'm making mine. Fine, she spat. But don't expect to see your grandchildren again. I won't have them around someone so toxic. There it was, the ultimate weapon in her arsenal. But she'd overplayed her hand. Toxic, I repeated calmly. Yes, I suppose boundaries do seem toxic to people who've never encountered them before. As for the children, you do what you feel is best. But remember, they won't be young forever. Someday they'll ask questions about why Grandma disappeared. Make sure you have a good story prepared. You're certainly creative enough. I hate you, she whispered. No, Rachel. You hate that the ATM is out of service. There's a difference. I hung up and turned off my phone again. My hands were shaking, but not from upset. It was relief. Pure, crystalline relief. The mask was finally off. We were no longer playing the mother-daughter charade. In my garden, the evening air was cooling. I poured myself a glass of wine, the good stuff I'd been saving for a special occasion. If reclaiming your life wasn't special, what was? Somewhere in Cabo, my daughter was probably ranting to Ethan, planning their next move. Let them. I'd been playing defense for years. Now I was on offense, and they had no idea what was coming. The fake family was finally showing its true colors, and I was done pretending I couldn't see them. The certified letter arrived at their house while they were still in Cabo. I knew because their neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, called to tell me she'd signed for it. The Postal Service had required an adult signature, and Rachel had apparently listed her as an authorized recipient. I hope everything's all right, Helen. Mrs. Patterson said. It looked official. Just some financial paperwork, I replied. Nothing to worry about. By the time they returned from vacation 2 days later, I'd already heard from Mark. They'd hired a lawyer, some budget attorney who'd immediately called demanding we resolve this misunderstanding without unnecessary legal action. He seemed out of his depth. Mark told me over coffee, started blustering about elder abuse and undue influence. I pointed out that the influence seemed to be flowing the other direction, given the evidence. What happens next? They'll try to negotiate, probably offer you pennies on the dollar, claim financial hardship, standard tactics. He was right. Within a week, their lawyer sent a letter offering to repay $20,000 over 5 years, claiming it was all they could reasonably afford given their family obligations. I laughed when Mark read it to me. $20,000 for $125,000 stolen. It was insulting in its audacity. Counter with the full amount, I said, plus interest, plus legal fees. Non-negotiable. 3 days later, Ethan showed up at my door. Not Rachel. She'd sent her husband to do the dirty work. He stood on my porch in his designer golf shirt and pressed khakis, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. Helen, he said, not quite meeting my eyes. Can we talk? I didn't invite him in. We can talk right here. He shifted uncomfortably. Look, this has gotten out of hand. Rachel's devastated. She hasn't stopped crying since we got your lawyer's letter. Crying because she got caught or crying because there are consequences? His jaw tightened. That's unfair. She loves you. She loves my money. There's a substantial difference. Helen, please. He attempted what I assumed was meant to be a charming smile. We're family. Surely we can work this out without destroying everyone's lives. Whose life am I destroying, Ethan? Because from where I'm standing, you two have been destroying mine quite efficiently. That's dramatic, is it? I've been skipping medical checkups to save money, eating rice and beans while you post photos of Wagyu steaks, watching my savings disappear while you buy matching luxury cars. Which part is dramatic? He had the grace to look slightly ashamed. We didn't know you were struggling, because you didn't care to know. As long as the checks cleared, you never asked how I was managing. Okay, we've been selfish, I admit it, but bankrupting us won't get your money back. Maybe not, but it will stop you from doing this to someone else. His mask slipped then, just for a moment, and I saw the real Ethan underneath, cold, calculating, furious at losing control. You're making a mistake, he said quietly. Rachel's already talking about cutting you off from the grandchildren. Is that what you want, to die alone? I stepped closer to the door, my hand on the knob. Ethan, I've been alone since my husband died. Your wife just helped me realize it. Now get off my property before I call the police. He left, but not before muttering something about vindictive old bitch under his breath. I made sure to text Mark about the visit, documenting everything. The next escalation came from an unexpected source: social media. Rachel, who'd blocked me on everything months ago, suddenly unblocked me just to post a series of passive-aggressive status updates. Some people think money is more important than family. Betrayed by the one person I thought would always have my back. Teaching my children that sometimes toxic people need to be cut out, even if they share your DNA. Each post was flooded with comments from her friends, none of whom knew the real story. The narrative she spun was masterful. The cruel mother who'd randomly cut off her struggling daughter, who'd chosen greed over grandchildren. I screenshot everything and forwarded it to Mark. Could this be considered defamation? Possibly, Anne, he replied. But more importantly, it shows consciousness of guilt. She's trying to control the narrative because she knows the truth makes her look bad. Then came the most pathetic attempt yet. Josh, my 8-year-old grandson, called from his iPad. His little face filled the screen, and I could see Rachel hovering in the background, coaching him. "Hi, Grandma Helen," he said, his voice uncertain. "Are you mad at us?" My heart shattered, but I kept my voice gentle. "No, sweetheart, I'm not mad at you. Never at you. Mommy says you don't want to be our grandma anymore." I saw Rachel lean in, whispering something. Josh continued. "She says you care more about money than us." "Josh," I said firmly but kindly, "adult problems are complicated, but I will always love you and Emma. Always, no matter what." "Then why?" He was cut off as Rachel snatched the iPad away. "Really, Mom?" she hissed. "You're going to traumatize my children? Me? You're the one using an 8-year-old as a manipulation tool. How dare you put him in the middle of this? He misses his grandmother. Then you shouldn't have told him I was too sick to vacation with him. You shouldn't have made him part of your lies." She hung up. But the damage was done. Using Josh like that had crossed a line I didn't think even she would cross. It solidified my resolve. That evening, Mark called with interesting news. Their lawyer reached out again. They're panicking. Apparently, they just got their first mortgage bill without your payment, and reality is setting in. Good. They're also behind on the second mortgage, the one you didn't know about. If they miss another payment, the lender will start foreclosure proceedings. I sat with that information, feeling something cold and sharp crystallize in my chest. How long would foreclosure take? Typically, 90 to 120 days from the notice of default. 4 months. 4 months and the house built on my stolen money would be gone. Don't accept any offers. I told him, let them default. Let it all come crashing down. Helen, are you sure? Once foreclosure starts, I'm sure. They wanted to exclude me from the family. Fine. Let them see what life looks like without the family banker. That night, I sat in my kitchen, looking at old photos. Rachel as a baby, her first day of school, her wedding where she'd thanked me for being the best mom in the world in her speech. When had that grateful girl become this entitled stranger? My phone buzzed with another text from an unknown number, probably another relative Rachel had enlisted to guilt me. I deleted it without reading. The counterattack was in full motion now. Every bridge they'd burned lighting their way to luxury was about to collapse beneath them. And I'd be there to watch it all fall down. The foreclosure notice was posted on their door exactly 93 days after their last mortgage payment. I knew because I drove by their house that morning, parking across the street like a detective on surveillance. The bright orange paper seemed to glow in the morning sun, a beacon of consequences finally coming due. My phone rang as I sat there. Mark's name appeared on the screen. The foreclosure auction is set for next month, he said without preamble. Given the outstanding mortgages and the current market, the opening bid will likely be around $300,000. $300,000. I had $200,000 left in my retirement accounts, plus another $150,000 from my husband's life insurance that I'd never touched. More than enough. I want to bid, I said. Helen, are you absolutely certain? This is a significant financial commitment? That house exists because of my money. If anyone should own it, it's me. All right, I'll help you prepare. But Helen, they'll know it's you. In a small town like this, word will get out. Good, let them know. 2 weeks before the auction, Ethan appeared at my door again. This time, he looked haggard, desperate. His designer clothes were wrinkled, his usual swagger completely gone. "Please," he said before I could speak. "Just 5 minutes. That's all I'm asking." I remained in the doorway. "Talk. We'll lose everything, the house, the cars. Rachel's already had to sell her jewelry. The kids are asking why we're packing boxes. Do you really want your grandchildren homeless? You have rental options, apartments. Rachel's parents have a guest house, don't they?" His face flushed. "Her parents, they won't help. They say we've made our bed. Smart people. Helen, I'm begging you." And then, to my shock, he actually dropped to his knees on my porch. "We'll pay back everything, every penny. I'll get a second job, a third job if I have to. Just please, stop the foreclosure." "Get up," I said coldly. "You're embarrassing yourself." He stood slowly, his face a mixture of humiliation and rage. "You're enjoying this." "No. Ethan, enjoyment would be watching a good movie or working in my garden. This is justice. There's a difference. Justice. You're destroying your own daughter." My daughter destroyed herself the moment she decided I was an ATM rather than a mother. I'm simply refusing to fund that delusion anymore. He played his last card. "The kids. Helen, think about Emma and Josh. They don't deserve this." "You're right. They deserved parents who modeled honesty and gratitude. Instead, they got you too. Perhaps losing everything will teach them what you failed to, that actions have consequences. You cold-hearted—" "Goodbye, Ethan. Don't come here again." I closed the door on his protests and immediately called the police to report trespassing, creating another paper trail. Mark had taught me, document everything. The day before the auction, I received one final message from Rachel. Not a text or call, but an actual letter, handwritten on her monogrammed stationery. "Mom," it began, "I know you hate me now. Maybe you're right to. I've been a terrible daughter. I see that now. Sitting in this empty house, packing up the children's rooms. I remember when I was little, and you worked double shifts to buy me that pink bike for Christmas. You were so tired you fell asleep standing up in the kitchen, but you still assembled it that night. I remember your hands, covered in grease, bandaged where the tools had cut them. Somewhere along the way, I forgot that mother. I forgot the woman who sacrificed everything and started seeing only what more I could take. Ethan says it's your fault we're losing everything, but I know better. We did this. I did this. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm not asking you to stop the auction. I'm just asking you to know that I remember. I remember the mother who loved me before I became someone unworthy of that love. The children don't know you're buying the house. They don't know any of this is connected to you. I've told them we're moving because we want a fresh start. Whatever happens, I won't poison them against you. That's one mistake I won't make. I suppose this is goodbye. You were right. Family isn't about blood. It's about love and respect. I forgot that lesson, and now it's too late to remember. Your daughter, if I can still call myself that. Rachel. I read the letter 3 times, waiting to feel something. Guilt, perhaps. Mercy. A desire to stop what I'd set in motion. But all I felt was tired. So deeply, bone-achingly tired of the manipulation. Because that's what this letter was. One final manipulation. The childhood memory. The promise about the children. The perfectly timed regret. If she'd truly understood what she'd done, this letter would have come with a check, however small. An actual attempt at restitution rather than just pretty words on expensive paper. I filed the letter with all the other documentation. Evidence of her continued attempts to manipulate rather than make amends. The morning of the auction arrived gray and drizzly. I dressed carefully, my best suit, the one I'd worn to my husband's funeral. It seemed appropriate somehow, marking another ending. Mark met me at the courthouse steps. "Are you ready for this?" "I've been ready since the day they told me I wasn't family." Inside the auction room, I recognized several faces, neighbors, local real estate investors, curious townspeople who'd heard the gossip, and there, in the back row, Rachel and Ethan. She'd lost weight, her designer clothes replaced with simple jeans and a sweater. When our eyes met, she quickly looked away. The auctioneer began with the legal description of the property. My heart pounded as he announced the opening bid, $300,000, just as Mark had predicted. I raised my paddle. A few other bidders joined in, but they quickly dropped out as the price climbed. At $350,000, it was just me and one investor. $360, he called out. $370, I responded immediately. He hesitated, then shook his head. The auctioneer's voice rang out. Going once, going twice. Sold to bidder number 47 for $370,000. I heard Rachel's sharp intake of breath, maybe a sob. I didn't turn around. I signed the papers with steady hands, writing the check that would transfer ownership of my daughter's dream house to me. As I left the courthouse, Ethan blocked my path. His face was twisted with rage. You won, he spat. Happy now? You've got your revenge? I looked him straight in the eye. No, Ethan, I've got my money back, or at least a house worth what was stolen from me. As for happiness, that will come when I never have to see either of you again. This isn't over, he threatened. We'll contest this. Claim undue influence. Elder abuse. Try it, I said calmly. My lawyer has every text, every email, every piece of evidence showing exactly who was abusing whom. Would you like to add harassment charges to your troubles? He stepped aside, defeated. As I walked to my car, I passed Rachel. She was crying silently, her shoulders shaking. For just a moment, I saw my little girl again, the one who used to climb into my lap during thunderstorms. But that little girl had grown up to see me as nothing more than a resource to exploit. And that woman, that stranger who wore my daughter's face, had made her choices. You were always a good mother, she whispered as I passed. I was just a terrible daughter. I paused, considering my words carefully. Yes, I said simply. You were. Then I walked away, leaving her standing in the rain outside the courthouse where her dreams had been auctioned off to the highest bidder, the bidder she'd created through years of lies, manipulation, and greed. The house key felt heavy in my pocket. Tomorrow, I'd walk through those rooms, deciding what to do with my new property. But today, I just wanted to go home, make a cup of tea, and sit in my garden. The war was over. I'd won everything and lost everything in the same moment, but at least I'd done it on my own terms, standing up instead of lying down, and that, I realized, was its own kind of victory. I stood in the empty living room of what had once been Rachel's dream house, sunlight streaming through the windows I'd helped pay for. The walls still bore the faint outlines where family photos had hung, ghosts of a life built on lies and my money. It had been 3 weeks since the auction. The house was mine now. Every square foot of it a testament to what happens when love is mistaken for a license to steal. I ran my hand along the granite countertop in the kitchen, remembering Rachel's tears when she'd begged for help to afford this place. My phone buzzed. Another unknown number. Since the auction, distant relatives I hadn't heard from in years had been reaching out, some to condemn me, others to share their own stories of being used by family. I let it go to voicemail. Mark had suggested I rent the house out, make it an investment property. Turn their betrayal into your income, he'd said. But standing here, I knew what I really wanted to do. I pulled out my phone and made a call. Community Housing Partnership, a cheerful voice answered. Yes, I'd like to discuss donating a property for your transitional housing program. The house that had been built on greed would become a shelter for families who truly needed help. Families who wouldn't take kindness for granted or see generosity as weakness. It felt right somehow, transforming their monument to entitlement into something actually worthy. As I finalized the arrangements, I thought about Rachel's letter, still sitting in my filing cabinet with all the other evidence. She'd been right about one thing. I had been a good mother. Too good. Perhaps I'd loved her so blindly that I'd enabled her worst impulses, funded her fantasies, and ignored every red flag. But that woman was gone now. In her place stood someone harder. Yes, but also clearer. Someone who understood that love without boundaries isn't love at all. It's just slow-motion self-destruction. The donation papers would be ready next week. I took one last look around the house, at the pool where my grandchildren had never invited me to swim, at the dining room where I'd never been welcomed for those family dinners in Cabo. "Goodbye," I said to the empty rooms, and it felt like closing a book I should have finished reading years ago. Back home. I found Emma and Josh on my doorstep, their bikes leaning against my fence. My heart clenched. I hadn't seen them since before the auction. "Grandma!" Josh ran to me, wrapping his arms around my waist. "We rode all the way here by ourselves." "Does your mother know you're here?" I asked, though I suspected the answer. Emma, older and more aware at 12, shook her head. "She thinks we're at the park, but we wanted to see you. Mom says..." "She says a lot of things, but we know you're not sick." I led them inside, gave them cookies and milk, proper grandmother things that had nothing to do with money. We didn't talk about the house or the move or why their parents looked so hollow these days. We just talked about school, about Emma's art project, about Josh's baseball team. "Grandma," Emma said as they prepared to leave, "are you really never going to talk to Mom again?" I considered lying, giving her false hope, but I'd seen where lies led. "I don't know, sweetheart, sometimes people hurt each other too badly to go back to how things were." "But you still love us?" "Always," I said firmly. "No matter what happens between adults, that never changes." They left as the sun was setting, promising to visit again. I watched them pedal away. Two innocent casualties of their parents' choices. Maybe someday, when they were older, they'd understand. Maybe they'd even learn from it. That evening, I sat in my garden, the same spot where I'd made the decision to fight back. The roses were in full bloom now, their scent heavy in the air. I'd lost a daughter but found myself. Lost a family but gained freedom. Lost the illusion but found the truth. My phone rang. Another unknown number. This time I answered. "Mrs. Gardner, this is Patricia from the Community Housing Partnership. I just wanted to personally thank you for your incredible donation. The house will help so many families in genuine need." After we hung up, I poured myself a glass of wine and raised it to the darkening sky. "Here's to endings," I said aloud, "and to the beginnings they make possible." Somewhere in this town, Rachel and Ethan were starting over in a rental, their luxury cars sold, their designer life dismantled piece by piece. They'd survive. People like them always did. They'd find new victims. Probably, or maybe, just maybe. They'd learn to stand on their own feet. But that wasn't my concern anymore. I'd spent too many years worrying about them, funding their dreams while mine withered. Now it was my turn. I thought about the message Rachel had sent that started it all. "You won't be joining us on the Cabo trip. My husband wants only his family." "No," I said to the roses, to the evening air, to the ghost of who I used to be. "I won't be joining you, because family isn't about blood or obligation or guilt. Family is where love and respect live, and neither of those things have lived between us for a very long time." The stars were coming out now, bright and clear in the Colorado sky. I sat there until full dark. Not lonely, but alone. Not bitter, but free. Tomorrow I'd start the paperwork for the donation. Tomorrow I'd tend my garden, have lunch with Mark to thank him. Maybe even book that trip to Europe I'd always dreamed of but never taken because the money went elsewhere. But tonight, I just sat with my wine and my roses and the beautiful, terrible truth. Sometimes the best thing you can do for someone you love is to stop enabling them. Sometimes the greatest gift you can give is consequences. And sometimes the only way to save yourself is to let go of the very people you once would have died to save. Family? Family is earned, not inherited, and they had lost the right to call me that the moment they decided I was worth less than my bank account. I raised my glass one more time. "To Helen Gardner," I whispered, "who finally learned that the most expensive thing in the world is free money, and the most valuable thing is self-respect." The wine was good, the night was peaceful, and for the first time in years, I was exactly where I belonged, not in someone else's dream house, but in my own life, living it on my own terms. Some might call it revenge. Others might call it justice. But I knew what it really was: freedom. And it had only cost me everything I'd never really had in the first place. Thank you for listening to this story. I'd love to know where you're listening from. Please comment below and let's connect. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts about Helen's journey. What would you have done in her situation? Your insights make our community richer.